Welcome everyone to today's webinar, What Healthcare Supply Chain Leaders Can Learn from Other Industries. I am Emma Goodman with Becker's Hospital Review. We will begin today's webinar with a panel presentation, and we'll have time at the end of the hour for a question and answer session. You can submit any questions you have throughout the webinar by typing them into the Q&A box you see on your screen. We are looking forward to hearing your questions. Today's session is being recorded and will be available after the event. You can use the same link you used to log in today's webinar to access the recording. Finally, there is a survey for today's webinar located on your webinar dashboard. Please take a moment to fill this out at the conclusion of the event today. With that, I'm thrilled to welcome our two fantastic panelists on today's webinar from Cardinal Health. Scott Barnhart, President of Global Manufacturing and Supply Chain, and Sean Halligan, Senior Vice President of Supply Chain Operations. I'm now excited to turn the floor over to our moderator today, Scott Becker, publisher of Becker's Healthcare, to kick off our discussion. Scott?
Thank you, Emma, and thank you, Scott and Sean. We've got two great leaders today speaking about supply chain and specifically focusing on what healthcare can learn from supply chain in other industries, two of the most senior leaders at Cardinal Health. Scott Barnhart, let me ask you to take a moment and introduce yourself. And then Sean Halligan will ask you to do the same thing. And then from our audience perspective, this will be a moderated question and answer. Well, I'll work through about 8 to 10 questions with Sean and Scott in trying to get to the gist of what healthcare can learn from supply chain and other industries. So thank you. Scott Barnhart?
Sure. Good afternoon. Scott Barnhart, and as Scott said, I lead the medical segment, Global Manufacturing Supply Chain. I've got about 28 years of supply chain experience across global and domestic, multiple industries across high-tech, food, beverage, and petroleum, and in particular leading high-growth international businesses in Brazil, Mexico, and India. And thrilled to be in the healthcare industry and been with Cardinal Health about 12 months.
Great. Thanks, Scott.
Thank
my name
you,
is Sean. Hi, yes. My name is Sean Halligan. I'm the Senior Vice President of the Pharmaceutical Supply Chain Operations. I come to Cardinal with over 20 years of experience in logistics companies like Roadway Express and the LTL industry, and most recently in most of my career in the retail industry, in long stints with Target and Nike. My role here at Cardinal involves planning, inventory planning, distribution, logistics, and delivering both brand and generic pharmaceuticals to our customers, as well as over-the-counter products as well. Our customer base involves hospitals and their networks, retail chains, and independent pharmacies across the globe. Throughout my career, I've held leadership roles in a variety of functions in the supply chain: distribution, global logistics, automation, and even held a stint in supply chain HR. So I've had the opportunity to spend time focused on people, process, and technology, and that experience helps frame how I think about the supply chain today. And I made a transition to the healthcare industry about 14 months ago in my role with Cardinal.
Congratulations to both of you. You both got great big roles at Cardinal and trying to do important things. Sean, you mentioned some of your background. You've worked in logistics, you've worked in Nike, you've had a long career in supply chain. What are some of the things that you're trying to do, or practices you're trying to bring over from what you've seen in the past into healthcare, and what you're trying to do with Cardinal Health supply chain from a pharma perspective? A couple thoughts there, best practices and what you're trying to do at Cardinal Health.
Sure. So I think one of the things that, from my experience in working in the retail space and watching retailers that win, they're constantly focused on finding ways to reduce friction for their customers, whether that be through the ordering process, the returns process, the delivery process. Retailers make sure they have great products that customers want, and then as retail has evolved into an e-commerce business very rapidly, it's about reducing friction and making it easier to do business with. And we're carrying that same philosophy into our pharmaceutical supply chain, streamlining our returns, finding ways to evolve our cold chain process, evolving our delivery process, are focuses that we have to help our customers run their business on a daily basis. Specifically, we're looking at things like delivery visibility. We find that our customers want to see where their delivery is in the supply chain, Instead of fixed time deliveries that we use today, we'll be working on evolving to more predictable and visible deliveries for our networks. In addition, we're looking at things like one-touch orders. How simply and cleanly can our customers order a product, have confidence that it's in stock, and know that it will be delivered back to them in that next day's delivery, and have visibility to when that delivery comes so they can plan their staffing to solve for the delivery that comes to them every day. So when I think about what we're seeing, a lot of the innovation in the other supply chains, whether it be retail or CPG, have a lot of translation to healthcare, and so we're trying to carry that forward for our customers as well.
Thank you. And I heard you mention 3 or 4 different things. Less friction in every aspect of the supply chain, more visibility, simplisticness of ordering, better transparency, visibility of delivering, and everything else to make it just a better customer experience, supply chain experience all the way through, like you see more and more in retail. Scott Barnhart, let me ask you a similar question. You've had this fascinating background for a long career, great career in food and beverage. From a supply chain perspective, Sean's mentioned some of the things he sees in retail that they're trying to bring into healthcare, specifically at Cardinal. What are some of the things that you've seen from your background that you're also trying to work into healthcare and a medical perspective at Cardinal?
Yeah, one of the areas is around, we'll start with, is on category management. So in the medical products side of the business, we've got approximately 50,000 core SKUs that we both manufacture and buy from other third parties. We also have about 25,000 other custom kits that we produce for operating procedures and other medical procedures. And so that puts us upwards of 75,000 active SKUs that we're managing for our various healthcare channels. And one of the things that we're working very hard at with our marketing teams is actually looking at category management from a perspective of both our brands and national brands, and providing an offering that you would see just like you would see in food and beverage or at the grocery store, is that we have premium products, we have standard products, and we have value products. And in today's world, we often have hundreds, if not thousands, of SKUs within a particular product category, where actually fewer is better in terms of being able to categorize and manage the category of premium, standard, and value SKUs to meet both the healthcare providers' needs and their patients' needs. So when really good category management, whether it's in retail, and Sean has plenty of experience in the retail world, or it's been category management in my experience in beverage, or even with distribution. So having worked a lot in food and with the large food distributors like Sysco and US Foods, at the end of the day, they are a distributor carrying thousands and thousands of food products that also are in the premium, value, and standard range. And so when you take and you actually manage the category, not only is it beneficial for the customer and the consumer, but you can actually apply different sourcing strategies, inventory and planning strategies, all the way back up the supply chain to unlock value. And so we are actively working very closely with our marketing team to actually unlock that value from the patient all the way back to our suppliers and inventory management practices.
So fascinating perspective on sort of really enhanced category management, and sometimes the thinking being that you have 75,000 different SKUs, stock keeping units, sometimes thinking that fewer may be better versus worse, even though it's counterintuitive, but truly the case, and then how you differentiate those within the categories. So really helpful and a different perspective than Sean had provided, just a different complementary perspective. Sean, let me turn to you. Can you talk about some of the key supply chain challenges you faced in the retail industry and how you overcame them, and then maybe some thoughts on how those apply to healthcare?
Sure. Yeah, I think one of the things that retailers have been working through is solving for speed. For decades, consumers were essentially taught to come to a store, pull products off of a shelf, put them into a cart, get checked out. And over time, retailers have worked to solve for the speed requirement because consumers want things today. They don't want to have to travel to the store. They want them brought to them. And to be honest, I thought that that might be a problem for Cardinal and how we bring our products to the marketplace. But quite the different realization is that at Cardinal, we're very fast. In fact, I would argue that almost all retailers would love to have the speed with which we replenish our customers' orders. So, and if you're not familiar with our business model for pharma, we have an order cutoff for our customers around 9 p.m. is a good general average for that time frame, and we're basically back to all of our customer base by 2 p.m. the very next day. And so that speed is something that honestly many retailers would just love to have. They can offer that speed in certain markets. We offer that nationally to all our customers across the U.S. And so there's a lot of work that goes into that compressed time of supply chain replenishment and the stem time to get to some of our customers that are in more rural areas. Even the best retailers in the U.S. aren't able to provide that level of service nationally across the country. So that is one thing that I would say we actually excel at in the healthcare industry, specifically related to pharmaceuticals. During my time at Target and during my time at Nike, we were constantly working to redesign our supply chain for speed where it mattered. And we had to be very picky about where it mattered because we were solving for maybe more major geographic areas, the coasts, New York City, LA, Chicago, the major metropolitan areas. However, from a healthcare perspective, a patient's health situation is as important in rural America, 6 hours away from our distribution point, as it is in an urban market. And so the fact is healthcare can't wait and a person's life can't wait. So we drive our supply chain to be that responsive for the pharmaceuticals that we provide to our customers, and that's our entire portfolio. So it's a really fast supply chain that is, to be candid and talking with some of my counterparts in the supply chain for the retail world, they admire our ability to kind of execute with that speed, and they know that on the end of that delivery is a patient. And so I think that's what we take pride in as a supply chain and something that the retail industry can learn from healthcare.
And Sean, let me ask you a follow-up question to that. How hard is it to be that fast and that accurate? And we all have seen this enormous race for speed in the retail world. You know, that Amazon, FedEx is now 7 days a week. Amazon tries to make sure everything's next day if you want, even sort of the same day. How hard is it to be that fast and that accurate? How much resources does it take? What technology? Just a couple moments on that.
Yeah, absolutely. It is extremely difficult. When you compress your supply chain to those tight of windows, order cut off by 9, delivered by 2 p.m. the next day, for your long stem time deliveries that are far distances from your distribution point, you really don't have opportunities to fail. You have to have weather agreeing with you. You can't afford traffic issues. You can't afford breakdowns in the supply chain. And to be candid, it requires a really resilient and flexible workforce to be able to snap to volume spikes or demand curves that we didn't predict. And so you have to really be flexible, quick, and agile to help support those demands. And so we use technology to do that. We have obviously advanced systems and order fulfillment strategies. And then we work with a lot of suppliers where we put a premium on flexibility and agility in their system as well to make sure they can make those deliveries.
Thank you. You mentioned something really interesting, which is the stress on staff. Just for a moment, how do you manage that stress on staff and hit the speed and accuracy? Just a moment on that, because I know that's an art, it's a science, it's a lot of work to make sure while you're delivering so well for customers, you're also taking care of your team. Can you give us 30 seconds on that?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk to that, and I think it spans across our organization working in healthcare, whether you're in a medical supply distribution center or a pharmaceutical distribution center. We really work hard to link our newest employee to our most tenured employee to our mission as an organization, and understanding that what we do is there's patients' lives on the other end of our supply chain. And so I think as we talk through our mission, vision, and values for our organization and how that applies to the work that our warehouse team does or our delivery drivers do or our back back office IT teams do, they understand that patients' lives are on the line for the supply chain that we operate. And so people sign up pretty willingly to that flexibility requirement and know that if the shift does run long on a given day or the route is difficult to make and the timing is critical, they understand that we're just not delivering widgets, we're not delivering, and not that those things aren't important, but we're not delivering footwear, we're not delivering apparel, delivering products that help people's lives. And so I think they pretty willingly jump onto that mindset of being flexible.
Yeah, just to add on, this is Scott Barnhart. I think with the organization the size of Cardinal Health and being a global organization, pretty much everybody, once you come to work at Cardinal Health, knows somebody, whether in your family, a friend, who goes to a physician's office, who goes to a hospital, who goes to a clinic and sees our products in use by the physicians and nurses, and you become pretty close to both what we do and how we care for people.
Thank you very much, and it's very mission driven, and it's also trying to take care of your people as you're taking care of the patients and your customers. It's fantastic. And Scott, let me follow up with you on really a similar question. Some of the key supply challenges you face in the food and beverage industry, and how do those apply here, and what actions to overcome them? I mean, Sean talked about in retail, this immense effort on speed and accuracy that's all every part of supply chain today, and that Cardinal has taken to a great level. Some of your thoughts on what you've seen from food and beverage, and how those apply to healthcare, and what you're doing to overtake them.
Yeah, I mean, we'll start with in the area of commodities. So in prior lives, buying a lot of commodities in the protein and vegetables and in other categories, commodities of sugar and corn, etc. And so you're used to pretty significant swings depending on what's happening in the weather, depending on what's happening in the global economy. And so it's one thing to provide, food and beverage, but it's another, is another way of thinking about when you need those commodities to actually manufacture. So often folks think of Cardinal Health as a distributor, but we're also one of the largest manufacturers of medical products out there. And many of those products are very high in commodities like cotton and resins in particular. And so on a global economy, we see lots of swings in both of those commodities depending on what's happening in large commodity consumers like India and China and Brazil, etc. And so two things come out of that. One is ensuring we have sufficient supply to actually manufacture the products that you see in many operating rooms, etc. And the other is to do it cost effectively. And so as everyone knows, we're continuously looking for ways to be more cost competitive, deliver high quality, and of course, Sean talked about service. And so we've got a number of commodity strategies that we deploy to ensure that we've got A, supply, and B, competitively priced as we actually take those raw materials and convert them into suction tubes, syringes, and other devices that are used for healthcare. And so that's one. We actually do a number of hedging strategies. We also have manufacturing facilities in 15 different countries, so we have access to the production of commodities in multiple regions around the world as well. And the other area is around innovation and the speed of healthcare and the needs of form and function of many of our products. And so we've got our marketing teams who are very close to our healthcare providers and to the patients, both provide significant input into the form and function of our devices. And there's always a pressure point in order to launch the either renovation to products or new products in a pretty short time frame. And of course, with the regulatory environment that we live in, that takes a lot of planning, all the way from our manufacturing process to our packaging to our labeling. So I would say the complexity in healthcare is even greater than it is in the food industry. We both deal with the FDA, but there's far more regulatory and registration bodies that we have to deal with in the healthcare business to ensure we've got safe products domestically and globally. So we've applied the same process, both whether it's food or beverage or in medical products, where we have a stage gate process that actually takes things from ideation, from our R&D teams through our engineering into our sourcing, manufacturing, and ultimately our scaling up and distribution of those products. And each one of those stage gates has pretty strict criteria, both from a quality, compliant, and cost point of view that we have to move through, but we have to move through with pace.
It's a fascinating perspective on how deeply you have to get into your own supply chain, your own making sure you have access to commodities, your own making sure you have access to everything to make sure you could actually deliver to your patients in the speed and accuracy and the pricing that you want to deliver. It's sort of a fascinating perspective that I don't think most of us understand, but that health systems understand closely because they know that when they're out of generics, they have spikes in cost. When they're out of certain things, they have spikes in their own cost. And so trying to understand now how you, on the other end of that, if you don't manage those spikes well in terms of commodities that go into devices, goes into supplies, and so forth, you could have the same challenges and problems. It's a fascinating perspective, Scott. Let me ask you a follow-up question to that. Please.
Yeah, if I could add to that, I mean, last week I was in one of our production facilities that makes compression socks. And that's the standard of care in a health clinic in the U.S. We actually have 138 machines that weave the cloth that go into those compression socks. And it's fascinating, the quality of the fabric, the actual weaving of it, spools of thread, some of it, because it needs to be comfortable on your leg, comes from Italy, and 3 different weaves that we do. And as you can imagine, that's the standard of care in the United States. But in other global markets, we are using clinical research and growing the standard of care, where today it's not. So the demand on those commodities in developing markets in Asia Pacific or Eastern Europe really stresses times our planning process of commodities.
It's a fascinating perspective that I don't think many of us can appreciate fully or do now that you talk about it and understand it better. Scott Barnhart, a follow-up question for you. With the focus that Cardinal has on expanded global presence, I mean, you said 15 different countries you have manufacturing in. You're just talking about the weaving of the compression socks in Italy, and the different cloth and different types that go into that. What lessons for best practices for hospitals, what have you learned from this that could be applied to hospital settings? Any practical thoughts on that, or biggest challenges of operation?
Yeah, I think when you talk about large healthcare systems, and I thought about this a bit, and in large manufacturing or any operation really, is simple, clear, focused priorities and strategy. And we've got 23,000 people who either manufacture or distribute product for us globally. And I wish I could, touch each one of them individually and have a conversation, but I can't. And so therefore, a very consistent, clear, focused set of priorities and a strategy, and Sean talked about it really well, is a very clear mission that helps you get up every day to actually address those strategies and priorities is something you just can't stop thinking enough about. Number 2 is clear decision rights. And so when you think about 23,000 people around the world, and leaders and managers and supervisors, clarity in terms of where the decision rights lie, who makes the call, and often, there is somebody has to make the final call, so clear decision rights. And then the lastly is, standard tools, technology, practices, and measure consistently, then drives credibility to that mission, the priorities, etc.
Thank you. So great, simple, clear priorities and focused, very clear decision rights, and then great technology coupled with measure everything to make sure you're hitting it right. those are at least three of the core messages that would apply to hospitals as well. Scott, did I hit that right?
That's right. That's exactly right.
Thank you very much. Just really helpful and practical. Sean, a couple questions for yourself. From a regulatory perspective, where health systems have to have a great supply chain with all the safety, security, and regulatory hurdles, so just a ton of safety, security, regulatory hurdles. How do health systems manage that supply chain? How do you manage that supply chain with all the regulatory challenges?
Sure. So I would say first starting with, we understand and support the fact that all of the regulatory environment is designed with our first goal as well, which is patient safety. The products that we move through our supply chain, we know they go directly to and are used for patient care. And so we keep that as an absolute top priority and understand that there's going to continue to be evolving regulatory security and legislative rules that we have to follow throughout a pharmaceutical supply chain. One specific area that I would say is coming to fruition right now and will evolve over the next couple of years is the Drug Security Supply Chain Act, so the DSCSA. And everybody kind of generally knows about this, but it is directly linked to the authenticity of pharmaceuticals and the control chain for those drugs moving through from manufacturer to any intermediary, that being a logistics provider, a wholesaler, down to the pharmacist and where it's finally prescribed to. It's a critical component of ensuring the health and safety of the U.S. population and the global population related to pharmaceuticals. And so we are very attuned to how this legislation is evolving. The first phase has obviously come into play with manufacturers needing to provide barcoding that interleaves not only the product identifier, but lot, batch, and dating. And so we're following that legislation and watching through our supply chain how those serialized drugs are flowing through. We're seeing that percentage increase month over month over month. And then we, as a warehousing and distributor of those products, need to track that where those came from, that they are authentic, that we distribute them to our customers, because that is critically important to the patient care. And so we see the second phase coming, is set to come here the latter half this year, where wholesalers will need to begin scanning some of those products and tracking that, pinging against manufacturer databases for authenticity. It's a long process that will come over the next few years to full fruition in 2023. But this is something that none of us can ignore. So if you're a small independent pharmacy or the largest IDN network in the U.S., the Drugs Safety and Security Supply Chain Act is a requirement for all of us to be able to comply to. And so we're investing significantly in be able to capture this data, transpond it to our customers, and then anything that would be returned to us, authenticate that product as valid and authentic. So I think that's what you're going to see is more and more of those types of regulatory environments coming forth, all with the idea of patient care, and that won't only be exclusive to pharmaceuticals. That comes through the entire healthcare supply chain.
No, thank you very much. And at the end of the day, it's an interesting perspective because you start with the very perspective of you have to respect that these are the regulatory rules. This is what it is. We've got to live with them and make it work, whether you're a small pharmacy or a huge pharmacy. And I think it's just a great perspective. Thank you. And Scott Barnhart, a similar question or a little different question. From a supply chain perspective, can you talk about your work around innovation and controls in sort of the manufacturing setting? So you talked a little bit about ideation and innovation and controls. Some thoughts there.
Sure. Let's talk a little bit about first just, I would call it supply reliability. And we talk about demand variability a lot in supply chain, but in this business, it really is around supply reliability as much as it is around demand. And Sean touched on it in some examples of his super fast supply chain. And we talk about it a lot on the med products manufacturing side, because we do need to take our demand planning and turn that into a very reliable manufacturing schedule. And so when we think about that, we spend a lot of time talking about manufacturing, because if we don't have the products, then we're not caring for our patients. And so we spend a lot of time in terms of between our planning functions and manufacturing, because we need the raw materials to be on time. We need the inventories of raw materials to be there. We need the raw materials that come in that we convert into products to be of the quality that we need to actually manufacture the products. And so there's a high degree of connectivity between our centralized planning organization, between our procurement and sourcing teams, between actual suppliers to ensure that the components and or raw materials that they're providing are reliable. And so there's a huge amount of conversation around just the flow of material reliability. And then we jump into the questions around the reliability of our own manufacturing plants. And so there's a lot of measurement of and moving to predictive types of maintenance, so that we can actually address maintenance on our machines prior to them breaking down. We look at the amount of time it takes to actually to change over machines to make new parts. So we have, we're measuring the average mean and average and mean downtimes, et cetera, and continuously trying to improve upon machine uptime, or most of you will know OEE. We're constantly focused on that, on the OEE, because if that machine is producing to the quality standards, the cost component of that will fall out. So we don't talk a lot about cost. I think that's just cost, because that's destructive to what we're trying to accomplish, which is reliability to our healthcare providers and to our patients. So if you talk about equipment reliability and supply chain reliability from our suppliers, and consistent demand forecasting to drive the supply side of it, then the cost will all come out. And so that's really where we're focused in this business. And so we're constantly measuring schedule adherence, schedule attainment, both on our inbound and our actual production of products. Then there's the quality side of that. And of course, quality is of utmost importance in terms of the manufacturing. And so there's technology now that has really gone a long way. And so the ideal of visual inspections are starting to move away, because we've got AI. And so with the intelligence of software today, you really get much more precise in terms of your quality screening. You take nearly all human factor out, so you know that the products that you're producing and your packaging are going to be of high quality, meeting the specifications. So technology is really in the AI space has helped us significantly.
Thank you. So it's very interesting you say, like, a huge focus on reliability and on measurement and on quality, and obviously a lot of technology backing all that up. And part of what I heard you say is if you really focus on reliability, measurement, quality, costs will start to get wrung out of the system correctly. Did I catch some of that correctly, Scott?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I mean, when I've been part of other organizations over my career when you focus on cost, and this is about saving lives. This is about a high-speed supply chain and/or significant number of SKUs. If you just focused on cost, you are going to damage the business. You're going to damage the name, and that's not who we are. And so if you focus on the right things, the cost will come for sure.
I think it's a great perspective. You're not saying to ignore costs. You're just saying that that's your only focus. It ends up screwing up different parts of the supply chain and logistics and so forth, rather than making it great. And if you make it great and hit reliability, measurement, quality, then sooner or later, if you push costs as well, everything goes correctly. That's the message I get.
That's right.
Sean, some of your thoughts on, there's so much innovative and new technology being addressed to every sector: automation, machine learning. You can't go through it 30 minutes without having somebody talk about artificial intelligence. what are some of your thoughts on the most efficient ways to manage inventory and sort of better manage inventory?
Yeah, absolutely. And it is. Those are kind of the key buzzwords that are going through everyone's strategy, whether you're in supply chain or other technology businesses. Automation, machine learning, the sophistication of tools has increased significantly over the past several years. And I will admit that we are constantly focused on inventory optimization, and that is not necessarily optimization for cost. We solve for a first primary metric, which is product availability. We want to make sure that the inventories we hold are best positioned for demand for our customers. And so we've invested pretty significantly in inventory planning tools and technology that do include artificial intelligence, sophisticated algorithms that look at our demand signals and help us put inventory in the best possible position to serve demand for our customers. We have our model set, if you would be familiar with it, to 99.99% in-stock level. So basically, we're not holding anything back in our inventory positioning to get our customers' demand filled. And we're currently running, I'll just share the statistic, we're currently running at 99.3% service level. And that 0.69% drives us crazy. We're constantly working at how do we get the inventory in the right spot to position to support our demand. And so our first order is to focus on order management, using those demand signals and push those requirements back to our manufacturing partners that produce the products that we need, and push that to our manufacturers to get us those products. Additionally, we work upstream as best we can to anticipate disruptions, understanding from the manufacturer what their supply chain looks like. We've learned a lot about those opportunities and connection points, to be candid, from our partners on the medical supply chain. Their supply chain is far more extended in the manufacturing and making of goods. And so when they start to see weather impacts, raw materials, labor impacts in certain markets, we work with our manufacturers to understand how their manufacturing environment might be impacted by those shifts, and how can we then anticipate where we may see disruption in supply. This is not a perfect science by any means, and something that we constantly strive to get better at. And then we're continually working on inventory placement with our own supply chain, making sure that our nodes are staffed and stocked appropriately, and working on technologies that will help us reposition inventory where needed to help support demand. And then what we always end up banking on is our people. And not a month goes by that there's not some story where we have ran out of supply in a certain spot, we're working to replenish it, and our team snaps back and finds a way to get a life-saving drug or a maintenance drug to a patient that's in need. And so while you can have the best laid plans and artificial intelligence helps you execute in those ways, sometimes you do have to use our minds and our people to provide supply chain resiliency when you find yourself out of stock. And so, as I said, we do have out of stocks. That's not what I'm saying, and technology won't solve for all those. But the combination of people and technology have helped us try and solve those for our patients and our customers.
Thank you. And so to hit the 99.3% accuracy effort, which is where you guys are at or better, it takes a ton of predictive analytics, a ton of technology, a ton of all these things coupled with great people to hit this right, is what it sounds like. You just couldn't do this 10, 15 years ago without some of this technology. I mean, is what it sounds like, Sean.
You're absolutely correct, and the challenge with that, Scott, is every day is a new day, and so the next day's demand is up, and so it's our responsibility to try and understand what those trends are and position inventory in the right way that we can keep this network moving. And so I spoke earlier to the speed at which our end of the supply chain executes, that order cutoff by 9 back to our customers by around 2 p.m. the next day. Similarly, the middle and the front end of our supply chain needs to operate about as fast. And so from our National Logistics Center here in Columbus, Ohio, out to our forward distribution centers, we run high-speed, highly responsive transportation networks to keep those DCs filled. And so it's the fastest gear the whole network has to kind of solve for that. And so our manufacturing partners understand that speed requirement and work with us to carry the right amount of inventory over a period of time to try and get that product in place. And that does apply to the products we can get our hands on. We're not absolved of any supply disruptions. If you're in the pharmaceutical industry, it's well documented the amount of disruption we've seen. If we can get the products in our system, we can serve you at 99.3% performance, which we're proud of, but never satisfied with.
No, and I think that's fantastic. And you mentioned something that I think is so important. The great organizations, the organizations that are the great at supply chain, do, for better or for worse, have to have some kind of rules and standards that they and their customers have to follow to make sure that this all works. So somebody can't order at 1 o'clock today and expect something at 2 o'clock today, but if they order by 9, they get everything they need by 2 tomorrow. A fair assessment?
Yeah, it is, and I think it's a standard of operating procedure, a consistency of that process. It definitely makes the supply chain more predictable. That said, a patient's life and situation doesn't always allow for predictability. So that's why I mentioned that it's the marrying of technology and people that helps us respond to the demands of the healthcare supply chain.
No, we understand that there will be exceptions to that where you have to deliver within an hour or two or right away just in time. But the reality is having standard operating procedures and being so good at what you do that you clarify, it's part of something that prioritization and focus throughout the entire organization. This is how we do it, and we'll make all the accommodations we need to for our customers, but we do have to have a standard operating procedure for 23,000 people to follow and for the company to follow and your customers to follow and so forth to make it all work right and as well as it does. The organizations that are so great that have confidence to do that, that's part of it, that you're confident in what you do, that you know this is how we have to do it right. And I think it's a great thing, not a negative, it's a great thing. Scott and Sean, I'm going to ask you each one final question, and then we have a whole number of questions from the audience I do want to try and get to, at least as many as possible. Scott, I'll start with you. Perspective on how you're leading the supply chain at Cardinal Health from a medical perspective, and then Sean, I'll ask you the same thing from a pharma perspective, sort of a little bit of your perspective on how you're leading. Scott?
Yeah, so let me jump in a little bit on the medical product side. We've gone through a number of acquisitions over the last 5 years, and so there's really three companies within one. So we've acquired a significant patient recovery portfolio of products, Cordis, cardiovascular and endovascular, and then of course we had a portfolio of products before. So in the last 3 years, we've doubled our manufacturing size. And when you look at it, we're everything from enteral feeding, electrodes, incontinence, thermometry, compression, a huge portfolio in the system. And so the leadership really comes from creating one Cardinal Health medical products company, and that is in everything we do, from when you walk into one of the 32 manufacturing sites across the 15 countries, it looks and feels, and the engagement from the workforce and the associates is Cardinal Health. We've got about 450 engineers between process, packaging, and product engineering. And how do they all come together with their sets of capabilities of chemical engineers and mechanical engineers and industrial engineers and packaging engineers? How do you bring all of those together to create one functional set of excellence within engineering, within manufacturing, within planning, within safety, within sustainability? So that is really what has been my focus since I've been here, and developing that strategy and that sequence of priorities to bring together one medical products end-to-end supply chain organization globally.
Thank you. And Sean, some of your thoughts on leadership.
Yeah, I think a little bit similar to as Scott referenced. It's constantly a prioritization for our supply chain. We are constantly thinking about our supply chain through the lens of our customer. And our customer portfolio base is pretty broad. So we have an independent pharmacy in New York City or an independent pharmacy in South Dakota, to a world-renowned hospital network, to a regional care center that we're working for our supply chain design on. We look at it through the lens of our supply chain, or through our customer. And we believe our customers are developing insights, figuring out how their business can operate differently, and we are working on that supply chain to help support them. So we want to be our customers' most trusted supply chain partner. We want to help create value for them by reducing friction, being easier to do business with, delivering reliably, inventory and predictably deliverable deliveries, and work with them to help drive out costs where it makes sense in the supply chain. And if we keep that constant focus, I know that our supply chain can remain cutting edge and stay out in front of what the healthcare environment's needs are. So that's kind of how we think about staying ahead and leading the supply chain, is leading through the lens of our customer, and that will keep a very full agenda for us to work on to evolve how we operate and how we support our customers and their patients.
It's fantastic. Now, Scott and Sean, we've got a ton of questions from the audience. I'm going to ask you to do this almost like a speed answer type thing. We're going to ask you each to keep your answer to 15, 30 seconds, if possible. And if not, you'll tell me after 30 seconds. I can just give you a couple thoughts on this because we've got a lot of questions, a lot of interesting questions, and I want to get some of our audience questions answered. And Scott or Sean, I'll ask you each to just jump in as I ask the question and see if which one of you wants to take it. And if we have too much of a war, then I'll have to call one of you out versus the other. The first question deals with numbers of SKUs. In all organizations, there's an effort, other than Amazon, to try and limit a little bit numbers of SKUs. Does the limiting of numbers of SKUs help the consumer at all, or is it, and when I say Amazon, I just mean on the retail side, not the medical side, so excuse me. But does limiting number of SKUs, does that have a positive or negative impact on the consumer, and how do you look at that, and how do you manage that?
I guess I can start, Scott. You can add on. I think you talked a little bit about category management. It is a constant challenge from a retail perspective. More SKUs generally means more sales. The challenge with that is it means more supply chain cost, and it means more footage to store that and more products to serve. And so from a healthcare perspective, we're trying to make sure we have the products that our customers want and need. And we feel like we do a pretty decent job of identifying what those are and providing a compelling portfolio for them to be able to shop from and buy from to help serve patients. So that's how I kind of think about that.
And you're not trying to, just so I understand it correctly, you're not trying to be one of these organizations that says we only provide these 10 things. You're trying to offer 75,000, but at the same time, you don't want to offer 300,000 because hitting the reliability, and at least at this point, hitting the right reliability for 300,000 would be much harder. And you don't really want the product that's used one time a year in Alaska. You want products that are used at least a number of times a year so you could stock them right and do them right. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I can speak to that quickly. I mean, you're absolutely right that you need to have a nice SKU selection in your portfolio, and that's why category management is so powerful, is that you do offer and you help the consumer with the right form, fit, and price point that they're looking for. And obviously, the price point and the cost of goods of those products, also plays into that. And oftentimes there is leverage all the way back to the sourcing side of the equation that you can offer to the consumers. So there is a sweet spot between too much complexity and too little choice that category management helps you find. And of course, engaging the customer or consumer in that process is really, really important to getting that set of category SKUs right.
Thank you. And it's certainly something that the hospitals, health systems, surgery centers, practices are always working extremely hard at, because they also don't want to stock every single thing that one surgeon might want once in a while, and they try and have some standardization. And trying to get this balance of 75,000 to 100,000 products coupled with some balance is a critical effort, and not an easy effort. And I hear you on category management. Let me ask another question, and I'm not sure that you'll be able to approach this question or what the politics are of it. The future of GPOs, as organizations get better and better at purchasing, and they get better and better at working, companies like yourself that carry a lot of their own products as well as other products, that carry this whole portfolio, is there a future of GPOs? Any thoughts on that? Or Scott and Sean, is that something that you don't like to comment on?
I would say everyone, the purpose of GPOs is obviously trying to drive down price and trying to drive up availability of product. And that's not unlike what we're trying to help provide. And so I think, there will be a space for GPOs, obviously long into the future, I believe. And they're all trying to drive down that same path, help hospitals, help their customers get best prices, best availability to help serve patients. So in my opinion, they will likely always be in place and have some role in this whole mix. Just like delivery of healthcare, that will continue to evolve. I think the role of GPOs will evolve as we fill in the cracks and fill in those spots as well.
Yeah, I'll add on to. I used to lead a GPO in the food space, one of the largest in the food and hospitality space, and we competed in some of the categories with some of the healthcare GPOs like Premier, et cetera. I completely agree with Sean. I think they will always be an aggregator of product spend and provide choice to a set of healthcare providers. I think they themselves are evolving to more of a service provider as well as just a value provider. And so I do think that there will be a GPO space out there, and there's certainly plenty of space for everyone to play together, and it will continue to evolve in terms of services and products provided.
Thank you very much. Another question. You touched on this a little bit already in the discussion, Sean and Scott. Predictive analytics. What are the trends you're seeing in your industry in predictive analytics? I know that could be a 2-hour call in itself, but I'll give you 30 seconds.
So I can start and you can add on, Scott. I think the more sophisticated our systems are, we're able to actually draw together a lot more base data. So thinking like Internet of Things, a lot of inanimate things in the supply chain and in healthcare have been just that, inanimate. Cabinets, storage devices, things like that, even the products themselves. Now, it allows us to draw on data where those things are actually lit up in the supply chain, and we can now trace and track how things move through. All of that data is, in my opinion, now aggregated in advanced analytics that will help us make better decisions about inventory, transit times, service levels. And so, 9 years ago, none of us knew what an iPhone was, and now they are, 7 out of 10 mobile phones in the U.S. So I will tell you that all of that data and all of the advancement in technology will place an emphasis across the supply chain for analytics. And so, our people are having to evolve, our systems are having to evolve, and the technology that we're buying into the future has to evolve, and we'll have an analytical bend to that investment.
Thank you. And let me ask a different question. Does Cardinal Health manage par levels or what the facility has to control? Do you see facilities moving towards bulk purchases for personal warehouse storage to reduce cost? Any thoughts on these questions?
I'm not 100% clear on what the actual question is asking.
Let me ask this. Let me ask this question. This part of the question I think it's easier to ask. Do you see facilities moving towards bulk purchases? Are they moving towards big bulk purchases or more just-in-time purchases? Let me ask you that question.
Our customers or Cardinal Health?
Customers. Customers. No, sorry about that. Customers.
No, I see quite the opposite. We see more and more of inventory management being pushed up. In fact, on the medical product side, we offer supply chain solutions and services to help our customers be more integrated and provide more just-in-time inventories. And we provide what we call value-linked services, which are, hospital-specific, within the hospital-specific totes, whether it's going to oncology or going to pediatric or it's urology, et cetera. And so we see more and more value-added services so that the flow of products and goods are directly to where they're going to be consumed as close to just-in-time as possible.
in less and less bulk purchases for the purpose of a little bit of cutting costs by buying in bulk and finding they don't use it right. So more and more just in time, less and less bulk would be the overall perspective.
Yes.
There's a great question on the biggest impediments to your core mission. And again, think of it in terms of what are your biggest challenges doing what you do? Just a couple thoughts on that very quickly. And Scott or Sean.
So I would think biggest challenges to kind of our core really kind of land in our ability to execute every day. I once had a boss in supply chain, not here at Cardinal, but in my past, come to my office and say, I just need to know that everything's okay in the supply chain today. And I laughed and said, it's never okay in the supply chain on any given day. There's always something that we're trying to navigate, whether it be inclement weather, hurricanes, fires, construction, supply availability, customer requirement, a customer in need, a patient in need. And so, to be candid, that's honestly why I came into supply chain a long time ago and have stayed, is I do love the fact that our work isn't simple. It's not easy to do every day. And so I will tell you that the complexity for an organization like Cardinal on our scale, back to some of Scott's earlier comments, our job is to work to make it as simple to execute, as frictionless as possible for our customers. And so that is probably the most difficult thing for us to navigate, is we have a big, broad portfolio of products, a big, broad portfolio of customers, and we have to find ways to make ourselves simpler and easier to do business with. And so that, to me, is probably one of the toughest challenges we face.
Yeah, my couple of cents on that too is just to build on Sean's point, simplicity. If you're not keeping things simple, execution gets complex. And it is very challenging because of, the competition that's out there, the customers, the suppliers, and then all of the things that you can't control, and whether it's geopolitical or currency or anything else. But you've got to keep what you can keep simple and what you can control, so that when you're thrown the curveball and the unexpected, you can deal with it in a much faster way.
We've got time for, I think, about one more question or so, and I've got a great question from a community hospital, which is, they don't have room for warehousing things, they don't have room to have excess supply at all. How can they be supported by, like an organization like yours, where they're sort of fighting within their system for the right allocation of resources, but can't afford to warehouse things and so forth? How does Cardinal work with a community hospital like that? And it's also in a growth phase.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that one. I think I kind of touched on it before. We offer a number of services to help supply chains help hospitals manage their supply chains. We've got tools, we've got software, and we've got resources where there are constraints on resources within a healthcare hospital, and not only help them manage their inventories and deliveries, but also help them with their costs in terms of going back again to category management, offering not just our products, but national branded products and other products to help them meet their cost budgets, achieve the quality of care that they're trying to achieve, and manage their flow of inventory.
Yeah, I agree 100%. We have a footprint of supply chain infrastructure that's out there, we believe, well positioned to help support our broad base of customers, and we love for our customers to leverage that network and provide the service that we can with the speed and reliability that we work to provide every day. So I think that's how I would answer that, is we believe we have a great infrastructure to help support them.
And we do.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I would say, as Sean did mention, he manages a program, for example, we call OptiFreight, which actually, as you can imagine, we help hospitals focus on what they're best at, and he and his team help move products between healthcare systems because that's what he does best. And so we've got a number of programs to help healthcare providers with their supply chains.
Fantastic. I want to do this. I'm going to wrap up because we've been on for about 60 minutes, and I know that our listeners will start to dial off at this point. I want to thank Cardinal Health, as well as Scott Barnhart and Sean Halligan, just a great presentation, and I think really informative as to sort of the challenges faced in hitting this 99% number and doing it on time, all the time, reliably, constantly measuring, constantly trying to improve quality, and some of the thoughts that are applicable to improving the supply chain efforts at hospitals, health systems, as well as practices, surgery centers, everything else, and the same kind of simplicity and clarity of what you're trying to do and mission-driven. Scott and Sean, I want to take a moment and just thank you so much, and I want to thank our attendees for joining us today. We appreciate it greatly. So Sean, Scott, Cardinal Health, thank you very, very much.